Welcome to the Real Advisor Podcast. TRAP. Trap. Please follow us and join in the conversation on Twitter @Advisor Podcast, where you can suggest ideas and themes you'd like the Trap team to discuss. Also remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a 6 out of 5-star review on iTunes. Doing all this really helps us, which means we can do more to help you. Now let's head over to the studio for the latest pile of Trap.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back, dear Trappists, to episode 13 of the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP Trap. My name is now Lick Ninken going forward, thanks to Abe and his mangling of the English language. Joining me as ever in the studio of Doom are the three other horsemen of the apocalypse, the so-called Trap Pack: Carl the Wodgemeister Widger, hello, Alan the Storyteller Smith, and Andy Hart. Gentlemen, we have a show packed full of absolutely nothing, so let's start packing it straight away. Andy, mangle some reviews for us, my friend.
Sure, over to me for 3 juicy reviews. The first one is from SMEC in Ireland. Great listen, 5 stars, great insights and easy to listen to. Really enjoyed it and looking forward to the next episode. Next up is Patchy 1000, 6 out of 5-star reviews, 5-star reviews, very insightful. And the slightly longer review is from Scooby D10, 5 stars. A trap worth falling into. I expected nothing less from these advisors with an E, but loving the relaxed format and chatting through shared thoughts and ideas. Could only be bettered if I was in a pub with them with a beer or 3 and I was there to join in. But for now, this does nicely. Appreciate you all giving up your time to give back. That's it. Over to you, Nick.
Super. Thanks, guys and girls, for the reviews. Keep them coming in. It does give us a little fillip and a shot in the arm. So just some topical tidbits to give this episode a timestamp for our Trappist audience. I see that the Personal Finance Society has now spent £800,000 on third-party legal and audit costs in its clash with the Chartered Insurance Institute, its bigger brother, or its effect parent. That sounds like an awful lot of money, and I just can't see this being resolved in any way where there's going to be trust or satisfaction on either side. That's an awful lot of money.
Don't you think
to spend on
when you hear these figures getting quoted, it's just insane? Best part of £1 million for some legal advice. Now, this is, I know it's kind of a big issue, but really in the greater scheme of things, it's a bit of a storm in a teacup, sort of interprofessional dispute. £800,000. It reminds me, when you hear of the regulator getting a new logo and it costs like 4.5 million or something. Yeah. The ideal job is to be a lawyer who gets appointed, or a brand logo designer for a big corporate, and just charge millions, because those figures are just off the scale. Nuts.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering that the PFS people certainly don't get paid for the roles they're doing and everything they're going through. So they've got the pressure of this battle with the CII, and then the pressure of knowing they're spending members' funds at this rate, but they're not getting paid for all this time they're putting in. So it seems to me like an immense mental drain, and obviously a financial drain. In other news, a firm in the southwest of England called Nexus has run into problems. It looks like there's been some nefarious activities going on. We can't say the person's name. However, there's one director at this firm, and in the news reporting so far, the FCA are after this one director. Suffice to say that this one person appeared to be one of these award junkies and won awards left, right, and centre. And I think awards probably have a place, but I also think it's a lot of it is projection. And people that enter awards for their own sake and routinely enter awards, it's like, okay, what are you trying to prove? And anyway, the thing about the one upside of the story is that it happens so infrequently that when it does, it's big news. But nevertheless, it does tarnish all of us, and that includes you, Carl, all of us advisors who are trusted with client monies. It's
definitely, Carl.
It's alleged in newspaper reports that there's been some misappropriation of client funds, it would appear. This obviously hasn't gone to
via
legal process
the platforms.
Yet. By platforms, yeah.
And the platform names are in the public domain. They are Nucleus and 7IM, apparently.
So it just seems to me like you're basically in turmoil over there, boys. So you probably need to get a decent regulator like we have here.
It's a sinking ship, and our MPs, our cabinet ministers, are evil, tyrannical bosses. The civil servants are breaking down because Dominic Raab stares at them That's one of the charges levelled against him, and they don't answer the questions he poses to them. And these are all microaggressions. We need some beefing up over this side of the Irish Sea, Carl.
Interestingly, though, over here in Ireland, we as intermediaries never actually get hold of the client's money. So I was a little bit taken aback that actually,
we're the same fella. What happened here was that this person allegedly was putting through unauthorized advisor fees from the client's investments on the platforms. We're not allowed to hold client monies. That's definitely arms. You just don't do it.
Well,
yeah.
General discretionary permissions.
Yeah,
okay,
there are
something any of us
have
have.
But yeah,
which we don't either. But I suppose I read some of the articles that you boys shared, and there's a lot of money gone AWOL here, it seems, and I believe from what I've read that it was found out because the platform said, "Whoa, what's going on here?" But did it not?
When you've got advisor fees running into millions of pounds, it's not surprising that there's some warning light flashes on a platform.
Yeah, but that's my point, Alan, that apparently this was over a 2-year period. So I don't know. Are there not red flags going up somewhere if there's large chunks of fees? Anyway, I'm sure this one will play out, and I don't think it's as Nick says, it does affect us all because it's it's damaging the reputation of all financial planners, and there's always going to be a few bad eggs, unfortunately. We all know that.
Yeah.
We just got to keep doing what we're doing, and I suppose our big focus here is to make sure that the corporate governance, I've spoken about it so much, make sure it's absolutely as rock solid as it possibly can be.
Absolutely. So I have another group of financial advisors that I'm friendly with, not as friendly as I am with you guys, obviously, but I have another group of IFAs that I occasionally socialise with, and last week I spoke to them about the fact that I'm just looking at VCTs, venture capital trust, and again, Carl, forgive me, I'm not sure if you have an equivalent in Ireland, but VCTs are where the British government is dead keen on start-up British companies, micro companies, getting investment funds to help them lift off the ground. And if you invest in these companies, you get these tax reliefs up front. And a VCT is where a fund manager, God help me, invests in a range of these small micro businesses, AIM-listed businesses. So you have to pick the VCT, and it's like going back to being an active fund manager, but on selector, but on steroids, because you really don't know anything about any of these startups. It's like throwing darts at board. But I put a bit of money into a couple of VCTs. And you get 30% knocked off your tax bill as a result. And I mentioned this to these IFA friends that I was with, and and one of them said to me quite aggressively, and I could see why he was being there. He said, "Well, okay, that's great, and you recommend these for your clients, do you, Nick, as likewise?" And I said, "No, I don't actually. I don't recommend VCTs. I know as part of the retail package products, VCTs are in that category, and we're duty bound to raise them with clients when it's appropriate. And I do raise VCTs with clients, but I'll never go as far as to actually researching and recommending one because there's just too many moving parts. So I flag the fact that VCTs are out there for clients that have got substantial tax bills. Do your own research if you want to. Because the clients are going to forget about the 30% tax relief. They're going to forget that you're locked in for 5 years. They're going to forget that these things are highly illiquid and you're at loss of permanent capital being wiped out. They're very illiquid. Clients will forget all of this, and also I haven't got the skills to research the underlying VCT to any great proficiency. But the thing that got me, this one of these IFAs I was talking to, he was saying he's got on his PI, the excess for standard stuff is about 2k. For pension switching, it's about 5k. For VCTs, the excess is 15,000 quid. Unless I'm charging 15,000 quid for each bit of advice I give on a VCT. There's no way I can touch them as a businessman. So although the FCA might say you need to address these, and I do generically, there's no way I'm ever getting into a product recommendation on VCTs. There's just no upside for anybody. So it's just interesting to see how other people, I don't know if you guys have ever used VCTs through the advised side of your lives.
Maybe in all the years, I think one or two, for very, very specific reasons. And this is assuming that your client is maxed out on every other legit tax wrapper, pensions, ISAs, even looking at kind of offshore bond wrappers as being a legitimate place to hold certain assets, only then. And so once or twice. We actually had a piece of work done for us a few years ago, which was it's very difficult to get independent analysis on this stuff, but there is some published information. EIS, forget about it. That's sort of one company at a time. But VCTs, there is some published information on it. And the report which we had commissioned, the upshot of it was that if it wasn't for the tax break, you're losing money on these things. With the tax break, you're just about breaking even. But the other thing to recognize is because it's very kind of labor intensive. You've got to do individual research and individual micro companies. All that is, super expensive. So your fees and costs are enormous. You still, it's sort of like going back to 10 or 20 years. You've got 5 or 6% initial spreads when you set the thing up. You've got ongoing fees of best part of 3%. If you look at all the added costs, you've got a huge hurdle rate, and the tax relief helps. But the conclusion we came to, and it was pretty much evidence-based and research-based, was you're better off just forgoing the tax break and just investing in the public markets in a more traditional way. Easy access, liquidity, super low costs. All right, you're not getting the same degree of tax breaks, but overall, all things considered, couldn't come up with a very compulsive reason to recommend these in any sort of scale, as opposed to the occasional, the very rare set of circumstances that will happen, once every few years. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
Well, I sort of concur what Nick said. We got to consider them for certain clients. I know some advisors are dead keen on them, and there are companies that do a lot of the research for you. But I still avoid advising on them. High-end vanilla firm. I don't want anything blowing up. I want to sleep well at night. And you're right, Alan. We spoke about this before. Some of these sort of tax-led investments, maintaining the capital value but saving tax on the back end, you're better off just investing in standard investments and getting the market returns, which over time are fabulous. So that's my thoughts.
Is that what you refer to yourself as, high-end vanilla? Quite like that.
High-end vanilla firm.
Yeah. Good one.
You can use that one, mate.
Very good. Very good. And the portal I use
vanilla,
for
not plain.
The portal I use for VCTs is and this is not advice, by the way. It's an execution-only discount online brokerage. It's called Wealth Plan, and it's really slick. And Andy, although you're not interested in these products, you'd love the way they make this so easy to invest in VCTs, which are more of a pain in the arse than, you've got to tick high net worth declarations, sophisticated. And I found out that Wealth Plan is owned by an ex-Hargreaves Lansdown director. So he's taken that approach of let's make this really client-friendly, easy to use, and it's seamless kind of end-to-end thing. So anyway, and Carl, just to close on the VCT, do you have a similar kind of structures in Ireland?
I don't think so.
We have EIS, which is more like what Alan described, investing in one company at a time. But there is kind of a couple of places who are doing kind of EIS funds. So there's several different businesses involved. We don't recommend them. A little bit like what you're saying, we're aware that some of our clients go and do them. But look, it's startup companies, so it's mega high risk stuff. It's not what we do. So, we stick to our knitting. We know what we're good at. And that's definitely not something that we will be looking at anytime soon or ever, I would say.
Interesting. Wealth Plan do VCTs, EISs, and then seed enterprise investment schemes, the real mega ones, so I'm just dabbling with VCTs. But
so are you,
whoa, this is.
Are you a serial investor now, Nick?
Am I?
You claim to be an angel investor, serial.
Oh God, I don't know.
On your Twitter bio,
change your Twitter profile.
I'm definitely 10x the serial investor I was this time last month. Let's move on now. Someone's put in the topical tidbit section value for money statements. I think again that's Hargreaves Lansdown. I don't know who put that in there. Whoever it was.
I put it in.
Okay.
Just something that came up. It is topical. It was the things themselves are not topical. They've been out for a few years, but the one I happened to notice. Again, this is UK centric. Not sure if your regulator insists on this, Carl, but there's a concept called all fund managers, asset managers have to create this thing called a value assessment. So they've got to look at
bullshit.
They've all got to, they appoint a board, and then they effectively are told to mark their own homework. Is this fund, is this range of funds, is it value for money to the consumer? Value? And it happens to be Hargreaves Lansdown one that I saw. I could have chosen anyone, frankly, but they were the one that came up last week.
But no,
I just saw this one. Just
not value, Alan.
Sorry?
Not one fund has said we're not value. Every single fund claims to be of value.
So the Hargreaves Lansdown, I'm not singling them out. it just happens to be Special Situations Fund over 5 years. They return 21.49%. Sector average, that's the sector of all other active funds, 54.21. So 21% versus 54. The Strategic Assets Fund over 3 years, Hargreaves Lansdown 4.99. The sector 12.37, and over 5 years, Hargreaves Lansdown 9.65. Sector average 26%. So they're generally underperforming by about 2/3. You know, the sector is doing sort of 2 to 3 times over exactly the same period in the same sector, the return. So they all sit around and say, right, boys and girls, is this value for money to our consumers, our customers? Yep.
Of course
absolutely,
it is,
tick the box. Now, I know there's more than one thing than performance, but really, to an investor, what counts for more than the actual returns on my assets and my investments that you're giving me? So the whole thing, and it just concerns me when you think about it, without dragging back the consumer duty and all the regulations that we've got, and we go back a few years to treating customers fairly and not providing any barriers to exit if someone wants to change their mind, and big providers have still got exit penalties. I just, honestly, I scratch my head, I get frustrated, I see these things, and can you imagine the amount of millions of pounds spent on introducing this legislation? And they all sit around, tick the box and say, yeah, we're fine, great value for money. We're underperforming our sector by 60%. It's ridiculous. It's a joke.
Couldn't make it up. Couldn't make it up.
I think we don't have that particular regulation in here, thank God. But I think we touched on this before, guys, that, you know, regulation is good overall, but regulatory frameworks that are open to marketing spin, which is effectively what this is, that's just not fit for purpose. And that's someone thinking something up one day on a Monday morning saying, oh yeah, we should bring that in, and then, you know, we'll roll it out to the fund management industry.
You know, the biggest thing, well, two biggest things that determine a lot of it. One is incentives. Where's the incentive to mark this down, saying this is not value for money? And the other is accountability. What happens to anyone who says this is good value, and someone else says, well, I don't think it is. How can you return, you know, 4.4% versus 12% and say this is good value? There's no consequences. It would seem to me, anyway. I don't know, unless there's other things yet to happen in the works that have yet to, you know, come to fruition.
Isn't it a little bit, Alan, like ESG funds that, you know, okay, there's frameworks and guidance coming in now as to what makes something Article 9 or Article 8 or Article 6 and all that kind of stuff. Whereas heretofore it was just, we've decided it's ESG ready, so we're going to stick the ESG stamp on the front of the brochure.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, marketing spin.
Well, we're here, boys, as the kind of the barrier to all this stuff. We're going to shine a spotlight on these things. Disinfectant is the best detergent.
It is. Sunlight. Lift up the rock and look underneath it, and then watch the little beetles scurrying away. But enough about little beetles. We had a Trappist get together recently at the Royal Oak pub in Marylebone to watch the first Saturday of the Six Nations. I can't remember who was playing, who won. It's kind
How is that whole tournament going?
But we had
spend a few moments talking about that.
We had a couple of visits from our beloved. We had a really good turnout of Trappists. We were overrun, but there were two people who especially stood out.
So I'm here in a pub with the wonderful Ben Cordner, one of the big Trappist fans. Ben, you're a big fan of the show. What have you got to say about it?
Love the show. I have to say it's probably the least worst option out of all of the Financial Advisor podcasts out there.
The least worst. That's not what we agreed to say. I paid you money for something. Right, I'm stopping this right now.
And also we were joined by a very fresh-faced young man by the name of Tom Sims.
So I'm here with Tom Sims from First Wealth, one of the better practices in London, probably the best practice in London, some would say. Maybe not Alan Smith. Tom is new to our profession. Tom, you're listening to the Real Advisor podcast. Be honest about it. What do you think?
Oh, it's great. As someone new to the profession, it's great to hear about people who've got so much experience, really just telling people, you know, the ins and outs and what they truly think. There's no BS, and it's great, and I love it, and it's probably the best advisor podcast I've listened to so far, for sure.
Okay, well, we'll take out the probably. Tom, you're on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
It's Tom Sims.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you.
Can I just jump in there? I've had to block Tom, unfortunately, on Twitter because he tweeted out that it was fantastic to meet you all, and you're all total gentlemen. Tom, I wasn't there.
I think that's why it was fantastic, Carl. Just so Tom Sims, he's another one of these poor sods with a surname that's a car crash. So if you want to find him on Twitter, he's at Tom Sims. Is spelled Sierra Yankee Mother Sierra Sierra. I mean, that's just abysmal. Ben Cordner is as you say it. So you can find both those guys on Twitter. And there were so many Trappists there. We run a very highly organised competition, and it was Ben and Tom out of all the hundreds that were there that won a couple some trap swag. They went
great event, loved it, and the rugby match. What a match! I mean that.
Yeah, we could talk about that, but let's move on to. I think time is flying by. As we say. No, it was great, and obviously. Scotland were well worth both their victories, as have Ireland, and it's shaping up to be a great tournament. So all the games so far have had something. I think the Welsh are going to be big. The ones who are just thinking, what this is doing not looking good for us in any shape or form.
At least they're a top seed for the World Cup later this year. The Welsh, can you believe that? Top seed.
Well, I know. Well, the seeding has to be done at some stage. I know. It does seem now. It seems
and
nuts.
In the quarterfinals,
they're number one seed, Alan. Wow.
Not number one. There's a group of they're all seeded in different 1, 2, 3, 4. Scotland a third level. We've got Ireland and South Africa in our group.
Yeah, and in the other group then is France and New Zealand. So 2 of Ireland, South Africa, New Zealand, France, and Scotland. Only 2 can go through. So it's
gives England the usual easy route through.
Yeah,
to the quarters before they get bumped out.
England and Australia,
we'll walk into another final as usual.
As usual.
Yeah, we shall see, Andrew. We shall see. We're not putting up any
hovers over the Johnny
tweets.
Wilkinson goal drop.
No, don't do it.
Even you aren't confident enough to put that one up there now.
No.
Well,
we are going to win the World Cup, and you heard it here first. Right.
But Nick, we'll do that again. Maybe next year. We'll have another event. And we'll get Carl to attend the next one, another trap get together.
Maybe a bigger venue, because we were so overrun with Trappists. Right, let's move on to the meat and potatoes, gentlemen. And Carl, you're going to talk to us about many things, about the third act, about physical and mental fitness. My friend, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah. We touched on this before, guys, and we're planning our second version of our Future You event, so it's kind of fresh in my mind, and we're trying to create the agenda for the couple of days and all of that kind of stuff. And it's come up in a couple of client meetings recently, whereby we've people who are selling businesses and are retiring and maybe passing business on or whatever. And a couple of times, despite our best efforts along the way, you know, when you ask what are the plans, the client doesn't know, you know, and I think it's so important, if we want to do real financial planning, which of course all of us do, to be addressing these issues with our clients well in advance of that selling the business moment or retirement moment. And I think, you know, the broadly speaking, I think we need to be talking about a number of different pillars, you know, mental fitness. So making sure that, you know, you're in a really good place, because a lot of people have a kind of their sense of identity is linked to their role, their profession, their job, their business, whatever that might be. And when it's gone, it's gone. And you might have a big bank balance afterwards, but a big bank balance afterwards isn't much use to you if you don't know what your purpose is going to be once you've gone through that transaction, shall we say. And I think work around, and I think it's really important that couples do this together, work around what your values are, what's important to you. And, you know, we can all talk about bucket list items and goals and dreams and aspirations, and we do, of course. But we really need to start drilling in, I think, as real financial planners, into those things well in advance of someone coming to that date. And you know, a lot of our clients are coming in, they're very focused on the finances, and yeah, loosely you might be saying, you know, real wealth is going to allow me do the things that I want to do with the people that I want to do it with and when I want to do it. But it's to actually talk about, that's a lovely statement to make, but give us details. What does it look like? And start to talk about that. And maybe it's, upskilling or reskilling. So, are you going to maybe, I have a couple of clients who have gone through this process and they've become kind of coaches, so life coaches, mentors, whatever, and absolutely loving it. And they're not doing it because they have to do it. They're doing it because they want to do it. And it's just something that I thought, was worth kind of bringing up. We are the Real Advisor podcast, so it's real financial planning, and it's so, so important. And, even when we were talking about the stuff earlier on about different tax write-offs or products or what, that's not what we're about. So maybe, Alan, I know your podcast is the Bulletproof Entrepreneur, and I've listened to all of the episodes and I find them really, really good. And I know you've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs who've kind of been through the process and out the other side. So what's your take on this? Have you kind of insights from the interviews that you've done in terms of, what people should be looking at or what the experience was for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think it's a great subject. I think it's really relevant. What's up with Andrew? No story. But no, I mean, this was the honestly, this was the thought process behind me even launching that podcast. Because if I go back over the years, I've been sitting in many's a meeting room with often a business owner. Sometimes people build a business and sell it and then carry on working. Sometimes they go through retirement, but wherever you do it, there's a transition. And so I was really, on a personal basis, I was fascinated by the human journey that people would go on. The financials are the financials, aren't they? You do your modeling, you make sure you're tax efficient and reliable, and assets are allocated in the correct ways, and you get organized. But there's human beings in the story. There's people and couples and partners and children and sometimes grandchildren, and there's a really complex dynamic and set of circumstances. And I for one, just find it just really, really interesting, hence launching this podcast last year. And reflecting back on it, so I've done 21, 22 episodes now. And some really stand out for me, particularly on this subject, Carl. There's one, I can't remember, episode 5 or 6, a guy called Mike Ames. And Mike was a very successful, he was in the recruitment industry, built a business kind of from scratch, scaled it up significantly, and sold it for, a very significant amount of money, life-changing amount of money, such that he never needed to work again. He was in his 40s at the time, sold his business, and as he says, and what's fascinating about these podcast interviews is people are very, to my experience, kind of surprisingly candid. They really sort of bare their soul, and Mike did particularly, because Mike talked about going to a very dark place. He said, sold my business, had all the money I would ever need the rest of my life, and yet almost couldn't get out of bed in the morning. And a lot of it was about identity. It was about purpose. He, again, openly shares on the conversation. He had to have therapy. He had to have people sort of coaching him and working with him. And of course, everyone else would think, I wish I had your problems. You're a multimillionaire, big deal, bring out the smallest violin in the world to play for you. But, as they say, this shit is real. And he really, really struggled. I mean, he talks about, the things that are, you talk about identity, but also activity. If you've literally got nothing to do every day, it's almost kind of comical in a way, because he said, I had to spread out my activities across the week, because I didn't have much to do. A friend would phone me up and say, do you want to play golf on Friday? He was saying, no, I'm getting my hair cut on Friday. How about golf on Tuesday? Because I didn't want to do two things in the same day. Little things like that were, kind of comical, but nevertheless quite important. And in fact, the conversation I've just had is a lady in the US called Denise Logan. And she's got a very interesting background. She's the latest episode that we just went live last week. Her original background is from a mental health background, and then she...
Grab yourself a drink, a very long drink. It's story time with Alan Smith.
Not for the first time in your life, you're rather premature, Nick.
I'm not sure.
I've got a story later. This isn't a story. This is just sharing the conversation I had with Denise last week. He was, mental health professional, qualified as a lawyer, built a law firm, sold that law firm in very tricky circumstances, did not make a success of it. And she's got a book called The Seller's Journey, and she really unpacks this whole thing and loads and loads of experience. She coaches business owners, particularly, and those going through life transitions. And it's just so interesting. You know, she's made an entire career out of this very complex, difficult set of circumstances. And as you say, it's not just about selling a business. There's life transitions, aren't there? It could be a retirement. It could be a divorce. It could be someone passing away. There's a number of just life experiences. And we are very much, you know, at the forefront. If we're doing our jobs properly, we are in what I call inside the family's inner circle of trust. You know, things are being shared with us that aren't being shared with the accountant, with the lawyer, with a lot of other people. And I sometimes say, you know, if there's a bereavement in the family, sadly, we're the first phone call after the family, after, you know, the children or anyone else has been contacted. Who should we call next? We'll call our financial planner, because they know the kind of the financial parts, they know the legal parts, but they also know the family sort of circumstances. So it's an interesting place to be. What about you guys? Any thoughts on this kind of this third act, and then life transitions? What are your thoughts, Nick?
I'll just throw in a bit about how, and I think we have talked about this previously, and that's okay, because these themes that we talk about are evergreen, and we talk about them repeatedly because we believe in them and we live them. The burden that we carry as financial planners, and again, I don't want the smallest violin in the world, okay? We love our work and we're well paid for it, and it gives us a fantastic lifestyle. However, we carry a lot on our shoulders, figuratively, and as Alan said, clients share stuff with us they would never share with their accountants, they would never share with their solicitors, but they'll share them with us. And these significant life events, you know, this the theme today of what do you do when you've sold, and you've got this great big lump sum of money. Firstly, you've got a human being who now is thinking, I don't want to play golf on a Friday because I just want to get my hair cut. That's how desperately barren my diary is. But also, they've given you their hard work in the form of this lump sum of money. Their 3 decades worth of hard work is now yours. Don't screw this up, Alan, Carl, Andy, Nick. Don't screw this up. And so if you imagine like a Venn diagram, one circle is the solicitor, one circle is the accountant, and one circle is the advisor. But we are the only one who overlaps on it. We know the client's finances. The accountant knows that. Great. We know the client's legal situation and their estate planning. The solicitor's done that, but the solicitor won't know anything else. We know their finances, their estate planning, and then we also know their cash flow, their money fears, their family situation around money, all the other kind of stuff. And so we carry a lot, and I think sometimes we just underestimate how much we carry because we have jobs that we enjoy on the upside. But there's definitely a subconscious toll that it takes on our energy levels. I don't know if Andy, you want to talk about that before handing back to Carl.
Yeah, I think the key word there is transitions, and Alan sort of spoke about it at length. Clients go through various transitions, and sometimes they overlap. We're speaking about clients selling a business and having a lump sum of money, but I think I do my best work with clients on the approach to retirement. 10 years away from it, usually in their 50s, they've got usually 120 months left to potentially fix the problem. And, they've got expensive questions. Am I going to be okay? Am I saving enough? Is the money going to last? I'm a big fan of the 3 questions that Mitch Anthony talks to with clients. I'll just very quickly go through them now. So the first question is, have you had enough? And it's generally just a question around their work and business. Have you had enough of going into the office or doing whatever it is you do? So have you had enough? That's the first question. People usually answer that, pretty definitively. The next question is, have you got enough? And that's a financial question. Have you got enough? Will the money outlast you? That's the key next question. They obviously then say, that's what I hoped you're going to help me out with. And then the third question is, do you have enough to do? Which, again, we've touched upon today. And that's usually the one that sort of hits them the hardest. And they think, yeah, my identity is going to be lost. Friday, I've got sort of responsibility. I'm looking after teams and, I've got an important role or whatever. And on Monday, I can't get the plumber to turn up, their identity's gone. So that's the thing that they fear the most, I think. Over to you, Carl.
Yeah, look, I think that's great stuff. I do think, Nick, just on your point about that we carry a burden or whatever. I get it that it's very serious, the role that we play, very important, and that people do lean on us. However, if you're really into real financial planning, that's what I get my buzz out of, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, right? It's to have a real impact on people's lives. So therefore, it doesn't almost feel like a burden, albeit it is really important. But if I can maybe elaborate on that point or kind of pull that thread a small bit, it's incumbent on us, therefore, to make sure that we are looking after ourselves and the people around us, right, in terms of the teams that are working with us. And you can only do your best work, and you can only have a deep impact on your clients and the families that you look after if you're actually in a good place yourself. And I think this is springing to mind that I think it was the first time I met all of you boys, actually. It was a Humans Under Management, Andy, 2018. And Alan Smith's talk was, I think, Advisors Under Management, so a play on the AUM letters. So the reason I'm saying this is all well and good, talking about all these things, but you need to look after yourself. I wrote a blog actually earlier this year, and it was a pointed blog because I wrote the blog to myself, and it was like I published this blog as a promise to myself. And the blog, which I think we'll put in the show notes, Nick, was called "Put on Your Own Oxygen Mask First," and that's something I've been really, really poor at, even though I know these things. I'm just about to renew my passport, 2023. You boys have seen the picture of my passport from 2013, which are the few years after I set up my business. And I look at that person, grossly overweight, and just, there is nothing good about, yeah, exactly. There is nothing good about that picture.
Oh, you look cuddly. It's a nice picture. Don't be down on yourself.
I don't. I'm very glad that I'm renewing that one is going to be consigned to history.
The word is, yeah.
But last year, I'll be honest enough to say, around this time last year, I actually had to step away for a couple of weeks. Right, I had to say, guys, I'm just not coping with everything that's coming at me in terms of my business, my personal life, everything that's coming at me. I had to step away. I had great people around me that I was able to be. I was nervous, actually, even saying that, right? And it was only for a couple of weeks. But my team here in Metis were absolutely phenomenal. And I do think, and this is really important, and anybody who saw the text messages that flew between us late last night would not believe this for a second, right? But I also had you guys to lean on and to say, guys, struggling a little bit. And we talked it through. And, part of us talking it through as well was that each one of you, I think, basically said, yeah, there was a time when I was struggling and, and blah, blah, and this is what I did. And making sure that Andy used to send me texts at ridiculous hours of the day and evening to say, remember, do this, remember, do that, and sometimes you're reading and going, oh, Jesus Christ, but do you know what? Brilliant reminders. And they were so well meant. And I knew I've got a bunch of people in my corner here who are saying, you are doing the right thing and drive on. So look, 1 year on from having to take 2 weeks out, and here we go back to the smallest violin in the world, right? And first world problems and all that. But so important, because you can only do your best work with your clients if you are in a good place. And like I'm in at the moment, it's really, really busy, but I'm just loving it, and I'm feeling like I'm having an impact, and that's where I want to remain. But I can only do that if I remind myself to look after myself. So Alan, I pass over to you, because I think the advisor under management is such a great phrase, and remind ourselves to look after ourselves.
Yeah, and that's true, and you've all said a version of this, because we are deeply entwined often in our not maybe every client, but a lot of our clients' lives, and you do play the role of we're not life coaches, we're not therapists, but if you're serious about this, you give a shit and you care. And this is where you should have come in, Nick. But I will share just a brief experience that I had a few years ago with this. We took on a new client, and you'll all have clients like this. Just a lovely couple that they came to us. That were just getting into retirement, and not every one of your clients are your best friends, but these are ones that I thought I would know them socially. I could hang out with them. I could go for a drink or go for dinner with them. They were kind of my sort of people, bit cheeky, a bit irreverent, but they're family focused. They had grown up children, just had their first grandchild, lived in London, sold his business, retired down to Devon, and were just planning, they were just early 60s, planning the next several decades of their lives. And we, as I say, we hit it off like the proverbial house on fire. We did all the modeling, all the planning, worked out how much they needed, and they were just mapping out the next several decades of their life. They love skiing. They were going to go to Canada. They would have this sort of bucket list things that we're going to do. And you kind of know where this is headed because everything was wonderful. And I got a phone call out of the blue. This is a year later after we did all the work, everything was implemented, everything was up and running. And I get a phone call from this guy, let's call him Stephen. And he just goes, Alan, I'm going to cut straight to the chase. He said, I've been diagnosed with cancer. I've been given less than a year to live. And honestly, it just hit me. These are things that happen, but I was really shocked by it. I was taken aback by it. And particularly because I was deeply involved in the initial planning work and really in quite a granular level, working out what they were going to do this year, 5 years now, 10 years from now. And he says, yeah, I've got less than a year to live. So look, can we meet up? We've got some stuff to do. And whoa. So my colleague Charles and I, we traveled down to Devon, and we spent a couple of days. We booked a hotel. We spent the whole day with them. And honestly, their house, they bought this home, their forever home to retire to. I don't know if any of you guys know Salcombe. Beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And it was just overlooking the beach, and it was just amazing, an amazing home. You can imagine sitting in that room. You've all done versions of this, going through, just working out what life was going to be like after he passed. It was brutal. Really, really, the tears were never far from your eyes. And on the one hand, I'm thinking, well, I'm just a financial planner, just trying to do the right work here. But it was intensely human. And we stayed the night. We all went out for dinner that evening, and it was, it's ridiculous, really, because we had a laugh. We were laughing. We almost forgot what was going on at the time. A few bottles of wine were shared. Good, and he used to, take the mick out of me. All sorts of little sort of jokes he would have at my expense and at Charles's expense. And it was anyway, we just had a good fun evening. Next day, drives us back to the train station, gives me a hug, which I don't do with every client, certainly every male client, and looks me in the eye and he said, thank God you're here looking after us for this difficult time. Go home, life goes on, keep in touch with them. Then I get a call from his wife to say, only a few months later, look, he's gone, he's passed. He's gone. And I was just, and that particular example, and we've got versions of them. There's other situations I've been involved as well, but that one really hit me hard. I took it I couldn't stop thinking about it. Honestly, for weeks and weeks, I still think about it now. This was a couple of years ago, this all happened. I still think about it now, and we do take on, sometimes we've got this kind of mental gymnastics to go through. And again, it's more sort of small violins, but this can hit you very profoundly. When the other side of the coin, when you get in, the positive is you get close to a family, you understand what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve with their life. And the downside is when things don't go according to plan, you really feel it. You feel it in a hard way. So again, this is a sort of the ups and downs of the work that we do. I wouldn't have it any other way. I love it, but it can impact you, and it can, as I say, it sort of knocked me sideways for quite a while. I would wake up in the morning thinking about all the unfulfilled ambition that family will never now have because of, a cruel twist of fate in life.
Wow, that's powerful. That's proper power. I'm glad I didn't play the Storytime jingle at the right time, because that would I didn't want to. That would have undermined perhaps the portent of that story. That's wow. Okay, guys, Carl, unless you've got something to add, my friend, we are now 44 minutes into this show. Where the time goes, I do not know. I'm happy to draw a line under the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, look, probably a very serious topic, right? And a little bit unlike some of the other topics we've covered here, but it is really, really important. And tomorrow is Valentine's Day. We're recording this a few days before it goes out, and it's the Widger triplets. Robbie, Rachel, and Chloe are 16 tomorrow.
Wow!
I'm taking the day off.
Good man.
I wish I took all of their other birthdays off. I didn't, but tomorrow I am going to, and we're going to have a great day.
That's fantastic.
So, look after yourself first, and the ones that you love.
That's well said, Carl. That is it. We do have a lot of Mickey taking on this program, but that's profound, and it's true. Look after yourself, look after your loved ones, and of course, then look after your colleagues and your clients.
Good stuff.
Now, can we get back to taking the piss out of each other?
Yeah, I was saying, that certainly was profound for Carl. Very good. However, tempus is fugiting, and this is normally, for those listening to this, not watching, this is where Carl makes a hand signal that suggests I'm self-pleasuring when I use the word tempus fugiting. We'll move on from that. I think, if I look at my nest... Oh, there she is. Postie's arrived at my front door. She's got her hands on our bulging sack of Trappist questions. As you can hear, the Trappists have been stirring, and they've been knocking them out. And if you want to knock one out for us as well, then go to the link in the pinned tweet at Advisor Podcast, or even easier, go to the exact same link in the so-called show notes. You click on there, you put your name, your question, you hit submit. If you do it that way, we will get round to your question. We're going through them chronologically at the moment. We've got so many to get through, but please consider doing that. That'll be absolutely great. And the 3 questions, well, actually, I can see 3 questions perched on the edge of our
That's possibly
sack.
the most inappropriate segue of all time ever. But anyway.
I don't write this stuff. I don't know what's it's your mind. But let me continue, because it doesn't get any better, because perched at the top of our bulging sack are 3 questions. We need to roll up our shirt sleeves, gents, and pull them off. Now, who's first on this? Let's open up this letter. This is from a Michael Gilmore, who's on Twitter as @WrightGilmore. This is a really good question, and Carl, you're going to have a stab at this first, and then we'll see how we go around the group. Is there a defined path for second careerists to join the profession whilst using their existing skill set, relevant experience, without going back to square one from an earnings perspective? Yeah, okay. If so, would love to hear more about it, and if not, what advice would the Trap Pack give to someone in that situation?
Wow. Fantastic question. The reason I offered to kind of give a stab at an answer here is have a client at the moment who's in the process of selling his business. He'll be 60 this year. And he said to me, do you know what, Carl, I'd really, really love to do what you do. Is there any way that can happen? The fast answer, unfortunately, is no, right? Because you need to get the qualifications. And then you need a number of years' experience before you can actually give the financial advice. Now, where he may well have tons of experiences giving all of the life advice and the life experience and all that other stuff that we maybe spoke about earlier on. So I don't know how you do the qualifications over there, but the very basic qualifications here, the qualified financial advisor, probably take you a year to get those, and then you're kind of getting settled in. But at 60, you know, he's kind of, just want to hit the ground running. So he was saying, what about if I just kind of grabbed a load of people and brought them into you? And maybe there's something in that. I don't know, but because it will be his own peers who he really, really, really values the work that we have done for him. And he's like, you know, most of them now are with private banks and stockbrokers and all that kind of stuff. And it's, you know, what you guys do is totally different. And he's always telling me that we're useless at telling people exactly what we do. So we have a marketing dilemma there. But there's probably no clear-cut answer, and probably not the answer that the guy who posed the question wants. Okay, that'd be my take on it. I do like it though. I do. Okay,
Andy,
do like
and then
the idea.
Andy and Alan.
The apprenticeship stage in this business is quite long. Long story short, I say it's a decade long. You can short circuit it. Someone who's, let's say, 45, somewhat experienced, somewhat financially stable, could probably short circuit that period. But yeah, it is a combination of learning new skills, doing exams, and building up a client bank. In terms of earnings, I think your earnings will go down to zero when you enter this profession. It just then depends on how quickly you're going to build it up. They're the facts at the end of the day. I mean, obviously you could get a job somewhere that would give you some level of, financial income coming in. So, but the apprenticeship stage, I think, is about a decade long. You can short circuit it and do it a little bit quicker. But I think from zero to knowing what you're doing in a client meeting, I think probably the fastest you could do that is probably 5 years. And that's really, really going for it. So that's the reality of it. Like all great things, why should it be easy? If you want to become black belt in karate, grade 8 piano, there's no shortcuts. Over to you, Alan.
I had somebody approach me last year on the same subject, and it is quite interesting. I suppose is it an upside or a downside? This whole sector has become more professional, hasn't it? If you was to ask the question 10, 15 years ago, you say, fine, get your basic level qualifications, off you go. And I guess it depends on the structure of any, there'll be people who will offer you a self-employed contract. If you can flog something, if you can sell products for fees, commissions, and you've got a ready-made network of people that you could sell to, off you go. The challenge is for the better firms, they have become far more professional, and there is a much more of a kind of, as you say, Andy, an apprenticeship, and it does take time. It's a bit like saying, at the age of 60, I think I'll be a lawyer. Well, you can, but you've got to qualify as a lawyer, start right back from the day one, and it ain't going to happen overnight. But you can do it if you're absolutely passionate and dedicated about it. But there absolutely will be a period of, if these people have been used to, having some reasonable earnings, there's no way they're going to be maintaining the same level of earnings for a period of time. I think there's sort of 2 or 3 component parts. One is the technical bit, which I think is relatively straightforward. You've got to get qualified to a basic level, which, as you say, might be probably about similar in this country, about 12 months. The other is the human aspect of it, and I think mature people, mature professionals are likely to be pretty good at that.
Yeah,
they've just got life skills. They've been, they've had kids. They've done all the things that people can relate to. But the other part of this sort of 3-pronged triangle is the opportunity to sit in front of people. Where are your clients coming from? And if you can satisfy 2 out of 3 of those, you've got a chance. 3 out of 3, even better. But it will take time. Although I can see this becoming more popular as the profession evolves and it becomes quite an aspirational profession to get into. I think there'll be more people asking the same question as time goes on. So there'll be more opportunities, I think, in future. But yeah, good question.
Yeah, really, really good question. My quick take on this is if you need earnings from day one, maybe come into the profession as some kind of trainee power planner where you're going to be an employee. And while you're doing that, you're learning about the jargon of our profession. You can do the exams as well, and then maybe migrate to advising. But you won't go from a standing start to earning. You just can't do it because of quite rightly, the regulatory burdens. 30 years ago, you could join one of the old sales forces, the Allied Dunbars, the Imperial Life. And I imagine once you've been through their internal training program, which is probably 3 pints of lager down the pub and how to write the back of an envelope, you'd be out flogging your MIPs and everything else. Well, those days are thankfully behind us now. It is far more structured. And there is and Andy said 10 years. Alan mentioned the human side of it. It's the human side that's why we're on this planet. And that's the bit that will take you 10 years to learn the nuances of. Okay, let's open up the next letter. Who's this one from? Matthew Tumbridge on Twitter as @Matt_Tumbers. Plumbing question. You don't like bonds. Got it. And he said in a recent pod that his tilts are value funds. What are the tilts the rest of you use for performance? And what, if anything, do you use to dampen volatility when you have to? Andy, you start with that and then I'll follow and then the other 2 guys can chip in if they want to.
Well, I mean, he's opened the question with we don't like bonds. No, we just know the role of bonds. I wouldn't say we like them or don't like them. We know their role. I suppose it's a relatively minor point. Yeah, so I've been through the Dimensional Vanguard sort of school of investing, index fund, asset class investing. My tilts are small companies over large, value companies over growth, emerging markets over developed markets. But still about 50% of my investment portfolios are large US developed markets. But yeah, so I have in my 100% Maven Invest 100 portfolio, there's a leaning towards emerging markets, small and value companies.
Okay, yes, and likewise, and this is not advice, of course. We're talking here to advisors, but the essence of what I believe is encapsulated in one fund, really, which is the Dimensional Global Targeted Value, which is ultra small cap and ultra value, and make of that what you will. Matt, your point about dampening volatility, we don't want to dampen volatility. That's the last thing we want to do is dampen volatility, because volatility works both ways, and most 3/4 of the time the volatility is up. So why would you want to dampen that? If you dampen the downside, if you mitigate against the temporary declines, you are giving up some of the permanent advance, and that is a big no-no. We have to embrace volatility ourselves as advisors, internalize that, and then find ways of communicating this arcane countercultural message to our clients. That's our role. Savers want volatility. Even people entering a typical 3-decade retirement want volatility, because if you can ride it out, that's where you're going to get the superior returns to ward off the pernicious evil that is inflation. Alan or Carl, anything to add?
Not really. I mean, it's just around the edges. We have small allocation to global property in the form of REITs, which is seen as something of a diversifier. There is some lack of correlation between sort of traditional equities, but all these things are just around the edges. You've summed it up well. Yeah, nothing else to say.
Okay, Carl, anything to add?
Look, I've mentioned it before. We use the Dimensional World Allocation Funds, so there's no point in me going back over old stuff.
Okay, great stuff. And I think we have one more question that I can open up. This is from Dan Raggett, who's on LinkedIn. Daniel Raggett with 2 G's and 2 T's. In episode 4, Andy said that he wasn't chartered. As a newly CII qualified financial planner, could you elaborate on what you think the issues are with the chartered qualification? Do you think certified is better? What are the pros and cons of each route? Thanks, guys. Really enjoying the podcast so far. Okay, Andy, you can run with this, but we have answered this a few times before, so just give us your bang answer.
I said I was proudly non-chartered. I feel like some people just hide behind the exams, basically. I think there's other sort of skills you've got to learn in this profession that I think are a bit more important than exams. I think I'm 2 exams away from being chartered, and I've purposely taken my foot off the gas and not done those exams. And I work with chartered advisors and certified advisors, and a lot of them are not very good at financial planning. But yeah, that's by the by. Over to you, Alan. Chartered Alan Smith.
Is he chartered? It's a bit of a moot point, though, isn't it? I mean, all things being equal, look, to me, it's a hygiene factor. You should be qualified to the level of expectation in your profession. If I know, and I completely know what you're saying. There are people with all the qualifications up the yin yang. They are hopeless. They can't do financial planning, can't do half this stuff, but they've got the badges. So that doesn't. But I'm going to assume that if I was hiring a surgeon for an operation, I'd rather he was qualified to the highest level of qualifications, and he had, the human touch and all the rest of it. I'd rather that than somebody who had base level, an O level in biology, but had really good sort of bedside manner. So to me, it's just a hygiene factor. So you should be. Everyone in this profession should be qualified to level 6, which is chartered. I've kind of lost track of it because we gave up my colleagues were CFP as well, certified, but you have to keep up your your ongoing CPD and everything else for more than one organization, and we just chucked it after a bit. But I think that's all changing soon, and with all the sort of shenanigans going on with the CII, I'm not sure how that's going to play out. The certified one, that's the US, initially came out of the US Certified Financial Planner, CFP, which is all about, can you do real financial planning? And they're all kind of merging together now. I don't think one is better than the other of the 2 qualifications. I think if you're really going after it, especially if you were young, if I was in my 20s, I'd try to get both these qualifications, 20s and 30s, get them both, get them out of the way, get them done, then get on with delivering, world-class real financial planning to your clients. One is not better than the other. They're just different.
If I could just make a comment, it's funny. Andy threw that comment out, I don't know, way back, and it seems to keeps
bouncing back. The thing is,
right?
because the industry keeps on telling, particularly young people in the profession, get qualified, get your exams, and Hart did one throwaway comment for 6 episodes ago, and he keeps getting pulled up about it.
It's intentionally provocative. Obviously, exams are very important, but yeah.
But if we listen to ourselves, right? No client is ever going to give a shit about the conversation we've just had, right? And again, it sounds like...
But Carl, your client assumes you're qualified. Yeah. I don't go to the doctor and say, can I see your badges? Can I see your qualifications before we sit down? And, I don't go to hire a lawyer and say, show me your legal qualifications. There's an assumption made. And I just think you should,
To be a regulated firm, I'm sure you have to have some level of qualification, right?
Yeah, but there's a minimum level. There's a minimum just to squeeze across the line, and then there's I want to take it to the next level, which is I'm taking this job seriously. I'm a professional, and so I want to be above the minimum entry level.
If I was advising my kids and they were in the UK, it sounds like you're in total turmoil, I repeat. But if they were in the UK, I would get them to do all of the qualifications.
Absolute shambles.
But it's just a joke shop. You guys don't seem to be clear on it yourselves. So I don't know. Seems like a moot point.
I think I
shouldn't have even interjected on this point. I'm sorry. I will mute my mic now.
I'm not sure if they'll make it a requirement for us to be level 6. That again will mean more financial advisors leaving the profession
anytime soon. They can't. It would decimate the numbers.
Yeah, we might lose, I don't know, 30-40% of advisors if that was the case. So, yeah, I think
maybe they want
that's
that.
good enough.
Maybe they want that. Who knows? Okay, we've given those questions a damn good thrashing, so thank you, Trappists, for sending them in. Keep on sending them in the routes outlined earlier on. I think it's time we moved on to what many people call the Culture Corner. Well, right, if all four of us have got a contribution, I'm going to start from the bottom up. Let's start with Mr. Smith. The John Dashfield Power Questions.
Yes, just something that I saw this was a few months ago. John very kindly, I don't know if anyone has met or dealt with a guy called John Dashfield. John is
I've got the questions deck. I've got the deck.
Yeah, an ex-financial planner. Yeah, that's it. And he does a lot of advising, coaching, and consulting. And actually, interesting, Carl, just linking a few of these things together for those who deals with financial planners and will do a lot of kind of quite personal work in terms of the personal coaching for advisors who in turn are giving advice to their clients. So he's written quite a good book, worth reading as well. But John Dashfield, he's relatively recently, and I know you guys have got, I don't know if you've seen these, Carl, but he's created a set of what he calls financial planning power questions. So they're like playing cards. And so there's however many of them there is. But within this pack of cards, there are some fabulous questions. And if you wanted to learn how to really get in and become better at being a real financial planner, obviously asking great questions and then going deeper and listening to the answer and then responding to that. That's how you go. That's one of the ways you're going to become a better financial planner. So those are available, client-centeredadvisors.com. Yeah, client-centeredadvisors.com. We'll put a link in the show notes. Worth checking out a lot of John's work, his writing, his blogs, his book, and these cards. That's my contribution.
Excellent stuff, thank you. And I like John Dashfield's very down to earth. He says there's no airs and graces, which is refreshing. Carl, you've got the podcast you'd like to talk about featuring the future World Cup winner Maro Itoje. Tell us about that, Carl.
He may well be. Yeah, I've mentioned this podcast before, and I just love it. And it's because it's relevant because the Six Nations is on at the moment. The High Performance podcast, and it's actually not the latest version. It's kind of 2 episodes ago. They interview Maro Itoje, and I just thought it was a brilliant interview because he comes across as a very kind of a humble, kind of a shy kind of a dude but at the same time, huge clarity of thought. Knows what his values are and knows what he's about. And that's like the total opposite to the player that we see screaming and roaring in the second row playing for England. He's also a wonderful player. Like, he really is absolutely top quality. But it was interesting because I was listening to it with my young fella, and like Maro Itoje was brought into the senior training squad in Saracens when he was 16 years of age. So this boy was, they had him marked out from a very, very early on. But the High Performance podcast in general, I've mentioned it before. Good, yeah. It's absolutely fantastic. But I really loved that episode. And, it's just the public perception of someone and the actual individual can be so different. So, yeah, really enjoyed that.
It's a bit like Ray Lincoln.
Great.
It's not at all. Like,
both the perception and the real Nick Lincoln are unpleasant, is what you
yeah. Although his tweets are a little bit worse than the person when you're talking about Nick Lincoln.
Mr. Hart, Mr. Hart, you've got a book to talk about.
Itoje is from my neck of the woods. We both went to school in Harrow. I'll move on from that.
Andy.
I have a... Yay!
Is he not Nigerian?
Went to school with Maro, Andy. No, he really didn't. Andy, Harrow is massive. You've never crossed paths. Never crossed paths with Maro Itoje. You were saying, Andy?
I'm pretty sure Maro Itoje went to Harrow School. Obviously, I didn't go to Harrow School, but yeah, it's very close to my yeah.
No, he went to a comp. He went to a comp, I think. He went to a comp.
He went to Harrow School. Oh, I might have got it wrong. Okay, move on. So my book recommendation is A Path Through the Jungle. It's on Audible, and it's free if you've got an Audible subscription. It's called A Path Through the Jungle, a psychological health and well-being program to develop robustness and resilience. So it's sort of on topic today. It's the guy who wrote The Chimp Paradox, Professor Steve Peters. He's a very sort of... accessible chap, and it's narrated by him. It's worth listening to if you've got an Audible subscription. It's free to download. I'm sort of 3 chapters into it. It's pretty decent. That's my recommendation for this fortnight. Over to you.
Thank you,
Nick.
Andrew. In our agenda for this show, and believe it or not, dear Trappists, we do have something that resembles an agenda. You'd put A Path Through the Jungle Book. I thought you were going to talk about the Disney film from 1967. Sadly, well, no, I'm sure the recommendation is very
Swingers.
good. King R. I'm the king of the swingers, man, a jungle VIP. I've reached the top. All that. Brilliant. Actually, it's my favourite Disney film.
By the way, he told you you got a scholarship to Harrow School. There you go.
You can't trust what you read. And I've got one as well, just quickly. So Modern Wisdom is one of these podcasts that I think it's Chris Williams does them. He's very prodigious podcaster. He has loads of episodes, and I kind of dip in and out depending on who the guest is. But the most recent episode, I think if it's not the most recent, it's 2 back. Episode 190. Rory Sutherland, who we all just like, you just stick Rory in front of a microphone, you ask him one question, and then 70 minutes later you just hit the stop recording button, and he's just off extemporising all kinds of stuff. He's got this thing about Japanese toilets, which is definitely
stair lifts.
Thing, but that's good fun, and stair lifts. And Rory has been at Humans Under Management. I think he came in as the second-ranked speaker after. Yeah,
Nick Lincoln.
He was the top speaker, of course.
If you want to laugh, listen to Andy Hart interviewing the famous Rory, because that's exactly what he does. Ask him one question, he keeps on trying to interrupt. Another question. Rory just carries on. This steamrollers across his host. An hour and a half later. Thank you. Good night.
So when he spoke at Humans Under Management, he was the final speaker of the keynote of the day. So he was on at, let's say, 4:30. He arrived about 4:15. So I'm frantically trying to find him, and he's at the front of the auditorium. I go up to him. He's literally going on stage in 5 minutes' time. He said, "Andy, just so I'm clear, is it a keynote speech or are we doing a fireside chat? This is 5 minutes before going on." I said, "No, it's a keynote. It's you for 45 minutes." He's like, "Okay, fine." And he just goes up there and just rocks it. So yeah, very much off the cuff.
That is a skill set. That is a real skill set. Okay, gentlemen, we're at 67 minutes somehow. We haven't killed each other. The tech has not collapsed, for which I'm eternally grateful. I've got through this show with an awful head cold, so I do. If I sound more nasally and adenoidal than normal, I do apologise. Dear Trappists, you know what to do, right? Like and subscribe on YouTube. Tell 3 of your peers about us, please. Give us a 6 out of 5 star review on iTunes. It all helps us. If it helps us, it's going to help you. This is one of those circles that goes round and round and round and just gets better and better. I don't know what it's called.
It goes nowhere.
Where am I going? I'm going to a complete black hole. Let's end it there, guys. I think it's time to wrap up, and we will see each other in 2 weeks' time in the studio of Doom. Until then, take care out there, guys.
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everybody.